there. How are you doing today? Do you feel like doing a little bit of Dollar Tree DIYing with me today? Well, come on in. Let's get started. What have I got going on for you for today? Well, life has been a bit crazy this May with all of the doctor's appointments for Ray that we've had to commute to that are out of town. And so today I thought I would just bring to you a recap, a Throwback Thursday recap of all of my greatest hits. DIY videos that have gone over 1 million views. Yes, that is very humbling to say that I can actually even say it, that I have videos that have reached over 1 million. A couple of them are almost at 2 million views. And so for those of you who are new to my channel that maybe haven't seen some of these videos, I thought I'd throw together some of my greatest hits for this Thursday and make it a Throwback Thursday. So I'm gonna quit my gabbing, let's jump into it, go pop some popcorn, kick up your feet, and watch some of my greatest hits. Let's get to it. Alrighty, let's get this DIY started with a little crackle medium. I picked up this folk art crackle medium from Michael's for about $7.99 with a 40% off coupon. You can get it for about $4.50. This has lasted me a while. I've used it in several DIYs. A little goes a long way. This step is definitely optional. If you don't like that weathered crackled look, you can skip this step and just paint the outside of this frame to suit your decor. I like the look of the weathered crackled paint, so I'm gonna start off by giving the outside of this mirror, the frame, a good coat of this crackle medium. Now you're gonna wanna let this get good and dry so the medium cures. Once the medium's good and dry, I'm gonna take Waverly's chalk paint in the color of ivory, and I'm gonna put a nice light coat over the medium. As you're doing this, you're gonna see the crackle effect taking place pretty quickly, and your paint is gonna dry quicker than normal. You're not gonna wanna do too many coats over it because it will affect the outcome and the look of the crackle. If you want a more harsh crackle look, you're gonna just do a real light coat. If you want a lighter crackle look, you're gonna do a bit of a thicker coat and you're gonna go over it a couple times more. And as always, I'm gonna set this outside for just a couple of minutes just to let this top coat dry. A couple months ago, this wood contact paper made my favorite find. I found this at Walmart for $5.88. I picked up a couple rolls because I just loved it and knew that I could incorporate this into some of the farmhouse DIYs because of the look of the wood, how distressed it is. I just love it. And so with that in mind, I knew that I was gonna wanna use this contact paper in today's DIY. I started off by cutting a 12-inch piece in length of this contact paper. And what's great about contact paper is on the back side, it's got a grid, it's got lines, so you can easily just count the lines and measure out how many inches you need so you're not wasting a lot of the paper. Once I did that, I took my sheet and I divided it up into 3 sections at 6.5 inches long. And you should be able to get 6 perfect pieces at 6.5 inches long, the width of this contact paper. Then going with the grain of the wood on the paper, I'm gonna cut 80 5/8 strips. 5/8 is 2 lines shy of 3/4 inches on your ruler. To cut 80 6.5 by 5/8 strips, it took me a total of 24 inches in length of this contact paper. For this next part of the DIY, I'll be using a dry erase pen and a ruler. There's a bit more measuring to do. I know it seems like there's a lot of measuring and cutting, but I tell you the end result is so worth it because this is such a budget-friendly DIY and the outcome is amazing. I'm gonna start off by taking my ruler and from the edge of the outside of the mirror, which is the frame, I'm gonna measure in 3 inches and place a mark. At that 3-inch mark, every mark after, I'm gonna measure out at 2 3/4 inches for the full length of this mirror. So the first mark is at 3 inches, and every mark after, you're gonna mark at the 2 3/4 inch mark. Then from each mark that I did, I'm gonna measure down 2.5 inches and place another mark. This really is the extent of the measuring. It isn't hard. This is easy to do. It took me just a couple of minutes to measure this out. And trust me, measuring it out is going to make the outcome of this DIY perfect and really easy to do. I'm gonna repeat the process on the bottom part of this mirror, doing the exact measurements. Now the fun part begins. I'm gonna start placing my strips down, and again, these strips were 6.5 inches long by 5/8 of an inch wide. And I'm gonna start off by placing a strip going from each of the inner dots from top to bottom. Now that was why we measured it, because it really does kind of make it foolproof. All of the center strips are going to be lined up. You don't have to worry about if they're even, if one is higher than the other. By placing the dots that I placed, it makes it so easy to set down these strips, and it's almost foolproof. Your strips are gonna come out perfectly straight and evenly apart. So this is what you should be left with, are these strips that are going down the center of the mirror for the full length of the mirror. Now I'm gonna take and just place these strips at the bottom of these center strips here. And I found that if I take these strips and on the corner here, this top corner, if I place it in the center of these strips here, it's gonna line up perfectly. Everything's gonna be even. The idea is to place your strips in a way that they end up at an angle like this, so there is a point here in the middle that is right in the center of the two longer strips here. I'm going to continue to place the strips just like I just did down the full length of the bottom and the top of this mirror. And I'm telling you, once you place your first two strips, it all just kind of comes into place, and it's really easy to set these strips down. We're using contact paper, so it's repositionable. You can easily just peel it up and reposition it if you need to. It's easy to do, and I tell you, this project moves along pretty quickly once you've gotten the rhythm of placing your strips down. Now on each end of the mirror, we have this 3-inch space that we started off with where there isn't a strip. So I'm gonna take a strip and I'm gonna place it right along the edge of the mirror, but I'm not gonna do it where the full 5/8 strip is on the mirror. I'm gonna do it so I can crease the contact paper and cut off the excess, because it's gonna be too thick and it's not gonna be proportioned with the other strips. And so you can see that I'm just kind of creasing it along the edge of the mirror so I can take my razor and cut it off. And this is just gonna give it a more finished look and make it look like the pattern is continuing on. Now I'm also gonna take my razor and right along the bottom edge of the frame of this mirror, I'm gonna cut off the excess contact paper that's hanging over the edge. I decided to make all the strips one size, 6.5 inches, just to cut back on confusion. I feel like it just gets confusing when there's too many sizes about and you just don't know which ones you're grabbing, or you grab the wrong size. And so I figured it was just easier to cut one length of strips, place them and cut off the excess. Yeah, there is a bit of waste, but in this project I really didn't mind because we only really used 24 inches in length of the contact paper anyway, and this is just gonna make it a lot easier. I was realizing pretty quickly on when I was placing down the contact paper strips that I didn't much care for the color of the outside of the frame. It wasn't blending and going together with the color of the contact paper the way I had hoped. And so I knew straight away that I was gonna have to fix this, that I was gonna have to darken it up a bit. This really is gonna be an easy fix using Apple Barrel's Burnt Umber Brown and this black. I figured that if I mixed the two together, it was gonna darken up this brown to the brown that I needed it to be to bring out that darker brown that's in the contact paper. And I realized that that was the brown that I needed the outside of this frame to be. To seal the paint, I'm gonna use this matte Mod Podge because I wanna have the capability of cleaning and dusting this mirror and not worrying about the paint chipping off. I figured that by putting a couple good coats of the Mod Podge on it, it's gonna seal the paint onto the frame of this mirror nicely, and then I can easily dust and clean this mirror and I'm not gonna damage it. I do wanna let you know that it is okay to spray a vinegar Windex on the mirror where the contact paper is. It's not gonna ruin the print of the contact paper, but if you do happen to use a cleaner that has a bleach in it, it will take the print of the contact paper off. So when cleaning the mirror, you just kind of want to stick to either soap or water or a vinegar-based cleaner. Now to hang this mirror up, because I'm hanging it up in the horizontal position instead of the vertical position, I'll be using these Velcro strips by command. These hold up to 16 pounds of weight each. This mirror is nowhere near 16 pounds. I'd say it's maybe 5 or 6 pounds at the most. And so just to be safe, I'm gonna place 3 strips on the back of this and just put it up on the wall. It's damage free, it's easy to move, and it's gonna work perfectly. Use contact paper to do this. I knew that I could do this for under $10 and achieve a look that is very similar, and I love it. I love the rustic feel of this mirror, and like I said in the beginning, this is definitely one of those DIYs that you can do to suit your decor, any decor, very easily, just by changing the color of the frame of the mirror and the contact paper. Alrighty, so getting started, to cover my range, I needed 7 of these plaques. Now, there is not a universal size for stovetop ranges, so you may not need 7. I do suggest measuring out the width of your range and going from there. You may only need 4 or 5. Then I'm gonna go ahead and remove the cute little embellishments on each of these plaques, the paws, the bow, and of course we're gonna remove the hanger. For the areas where the embellishments were, I'm gonna take a real fine sandpaper. You don't want to use anything real rough like this one because when you sand it, it's going to make it worse. And so the idea is just to really smooth out the paper in the edges so when we paint it, it doesn't show. And so just by using a fine grade sandpaper, you can do that. And it only takes a couple minutes, and I'm going to do this again to all 7 of these plaques. To attach all 7 of these plaques together, I'm going to flip them over, and on the back side, setting them side by side, I'm going to use some of these jumbo popsicle sticks and some of Aleene's tacky glue. Really, your glue choice is all your preference. I've seen great results with this Aleene's glue. I really like it. If you want to use a wood glue, you can use a wood glue. If you want to use E6000, you can do that. Just keep in mind that E6000 takes a while to dry. It has to cure, so you're going to be waiting a few hours, to where the Aleene's tacky glue, within an hour, I should be able to move this piece. And so I'm going to place all of these popsicle sticks on the seams where each of the plaques meet, and I'm going to be real generous with the amount of glue that I use. When placing these popsicle sticks, you really want to make sure and not do it to the edge or edges of the plaque. You want to stay about an inch away, because there's going to be a base to this, and so you want this to be able to set evenly down. And so you can see here at the top where I stayed about an inch from the top edges on both ends. To really help keep these plaques together, I'm going to use just a bit of blue painter's tape just to really keep them good and close. I also decided to add some magazines just to give it a bit of weight on top of the popsicle sticks, just to get them really good and adhered to the plaques. I did want to show you that if you needed to cut one of these plaques because you have a funky size range, I had to cut mine using these 3 lines as a guide. It actually worked out perfect and was the perfect size, just cutting off one of these sections. If you tape a ruler to your plaque and you use the ruler as a guide and score it several times with a razor, you'll be able to cut through this pretty quickly. I was able to cut through it in just about 4 or 5 minutes. If you don't have a ruler that's long enough, you will have to move your ruler down like I did, and just to continue scoring for the second half of the plaque, the bottom half of it. Once you've got it pretty well scored through, if you take and just kind of fold the plaque backwards, you'll see that it will break through. But I didn't want it to break and rip, and so as I was folding and bending it backwards, I did take my razor on the back side and just kind of run it along that folded edge, and it cut through perfectly. I'm gonna run a piece of sandpaper over this just to sand it down and to smooth it out just a bit. Now, some of you may be asking, why not just use plywood instead of gluing 7 of these plaques together? Well, there are a couple reasons why I went with this plaque. One being plywood is going to add weight to this, and so it's gonna make it a heavier piece to lift up. And 2, I like to give subscribers an alternative to using wood. If you want to use plywood, you totally can. Another reason why I went with the plaques was because by gluing these plaques together side by side, it's going to give the look and the feel of wood panels. Because of where the 2 plaques meet, there's gonna be a seam here, and when you paint it and you sand it, you're gonna get that natural seam that comes out. To where if you use plywood, you're gonna have to paint it on, and there are people who are gonna say, I'm not artistically inclined. If I paint this, it's gonna look like funky lines, and it's not gonna look like that. And so by using these plaques, you are giving the illusion of wood panels, which is very rustic and farmhouse. You can see that I am easily able to flip this over. It is a very sturdy piece. The popsicle sticks I'm happy with. If you're worried about it not being sturdy enough, you could always reinforce it with a bit of cardboard if you have some extra cardboard lying around. For the top of this cover, I wanted to add an elevated decorative piece to each side. And so to do that, I'm gonna be using these 1x4 pieces of wood. I had these left over from a DIY that I'm gonna be bringing to you here real soon. Really, going the route of the wood is so much cheaper than really doing it any other way. Going to your local hardware store, you're gonna pay maybe $3 for a 6-foot piece of this, and you're not even gonna use it all in this DIY. You're gonna have some left over, and the hardware store will give you a couple cuts for free. So you might as well take advantage of that, save yourself some money. If you don't wanna go to the hardware store, you could always use these wood slats that you can get at Walmart. This is by Create and Go. 6 come in a pack. You're gonna need 2 packs. I paid $2.97 a pack for these, so you're gonna end up paying $6 for 2 packs, which is way more than you would pay if you bought the wood itself. Another alternative would be to use some of Dollar Tree's Jenga blocks and glue a couple of rows together. There again, you're probably gonna need like 5 or 6 boxes, so you're still gonna spend more money. So your best bet is just to go to your local hardware store and have them cut you some wood, and you're gonna spend $3. To glue these on, I will be using some of Dollar Tree's wood glue. This is by Crafter Square. If you have a wood glue that you prefer better than this, go for it. I've seen great results with this glue, so that's what I'm gonna be using. For the base of my cover, I am using Jenga blocks, and I needed 7 boxes to do this. And so this is kind of the frame that's going to hold the top up. I've got taller grates on my range, and so I needed to make these high enough that the plaques wouldn't touch it. And so to do that, I glued together using Aleene's glue a stack of 4, a set of 4 blocks. And I did 62 of these, I believe, which is going to make this entire frame. Once I glued the 4 sets together side by side, I rotated them and I glued them together side by side with, I guess, the blocks now horizontal instead of vertical, if that makes any sense. And I had to do 2 sets of 20, which would be a row of 20, and that was for the top and the back. And for the sides, I did 2 sets of 12. And again, using the Aleene's glue, this worked really well. I suggest kind of gluing these together in pieces so that way you can kind of maneuver the blocks and push them together easily. Now for the base of this cover, I do suggest that when doing this, there are no universal sizes. I can't tell you what size you're gonna need or how many blocks you're gonna need for your stove because I did mine based on my range. And so I think the best thing to do when sizing it is just to play with your blocks, stand them up, lay them on their sides and go across just to see how many blocks you're gonna need. And you really wanna try and make it a size so you don't need to cut those blocks. And that was what I did with mine. That back row of blocks up against the backsplash, it's actually about 1.5 to 2 inches away from the backsplash. But when I put the top on, the plaques themselves are actually gonna be touching the backsplash. And so by doing it this way, I saved myself from having to cut any blocks. I do suggest gluing your frame together in place around the range itself. It's gonna make it a lot easier. Once you've got your frame glued together, before it dries, you're gonna place the top on this. And so to do that, I'm gonna place some glue along the top edge of all of the Jenga blocks. Then I'm just gonna gently place the plaques right on top. And so by doing it while it's wet, it's gonna give you the capability of kind of maneuvering things around for a couple minutes to get things straight in place, lined up with each other, and I think it's just gonna work out better. You're gonna see that my plaques are painted because I had gotten a little excited ahead of time. You don't need to paint them. I kind of jumped the gun. I figured since I gotta wait for this piece to dry, now would be a good time to fill in these holes that the plaques originally had that I forgot about until I started painting it. And then I thought, oh wow, I needed to fill these in. And so that's why I didn't show that step. So since this piece needs to dry, I'm gonna use some Dollar Tree spackling and I'm gonna fill in the holes with this. And by the time the frame and the top are dry, these should be dry and ready to smooth out. What's great about working with spackling is once it's dry, if you just take a wet sponge, you can easily wipe over the spackling and the excess spackling will come right off and you've got a nice smooth surface and your holes are filled in. Now on these wood pieces that are on each side of the cover, I measured in and I found the center point. Then using this Black & Decker drill, this is such a handy tool that I invested in. I think I spent maybe $20 on it at Walmart and I use it all the time. It was well worth the investment because it really opens up what I can do craft-wise, DIYing. I'm gonna drill a hole on each of these panels. And I'm doing this because this is where I'm gonna place the knobs. I'm placing knobs that I can actually screw into this because although it isn't a super heavy piece, it is a bit heavier. I wanna be able to lift this up off my range without the knobs popping off. Now it is time to finally paint this piece and get these edges done. So the paint that I will be using is this Waverly chalk paint in the color of ink, and this is going to be the base coat of this cover. Because when I go to distress this and I sand this down, I want to be able to sand it down to the black and have the black come through the top coat. And so I'm going to give this a second coat. I had really only put one coat on this. And so you might need 2 coats because we are covering up the original design on the plaques and you can still kind of see through that first coat. And so yeah, you're gonna wanna give this 2 good coats of a black base paint if you're going with that farmhouse theme and you think you're gonna wanna distress this. For the top coat of this cover, I'm gonna go with Waverly's Cashew. This color is gorgeous. It's a bit darker than the ivory. It's got some beige in it. And so I feel like it's gonna go a lot better with my kitchen and the backsplash. I went ahead and just poured it on the piece itself because my foam applicator isn't gonna fit in the bottle. And I feel like it's just gonna help move the project along quicker. But when you do this, you wanna move quickly so your paint doesn't start to dry and it doesn't leave impressions on the piece that you're doing. I'm gonna give this cover probably 2 coats of this paint. You don't need to worry about perfection when you're putting this top coat on. And what I mean by that is you don't need to worry if some of the black is showing through because we are going to be sanding this and distressing it. I will also be using some of Waverly's Hazelnut. Again, this is another color that is in the backsplash of my kitchen. That's why I'm using it. Today, I am using a different technique to distressing a piece. Rather than doing coat after coat after coat of 3 different colors of paint, I'm going to show you a different technique, an easier technique to distressing using multiple colors. Sanding can be a bit tiring, it can be a bit of work, and it can take a while. And so sometimes if you use this technique, it kind of moves the distressing process along a bit quicker, a bit easier, and you still get the same aged, distressed look that you would have gotten had you done 2 coats of black, 2 coats of hazelnut, and then 2 coats of ivory. That is now 6 coats of paint that you need to sand through to get down to the black, or 4 coats really to get down to the black. And that is going to take a lot of sanding and make a mess. And so if you do what I'm doing, it's going to make it easy, and it's going to give the illusion that this hazelnut was under the cashew, above the black paint. It's going to look really cool. So as you see, I'm just going to kind of put this color in different places throughout the top. Now, stick with me on this. I know it's going to kind of look funky for a minute, but I promise you that when we go to sand this, it's going to look amazing. And like I said, it's not going to take as much work. I'm happy with the amount of hazelnut that I've got on here. So now I'm going to go back in with the black, because again, to get to the black, we're going to have to sand through 4 layers of paint, and I don't want to have to do that. There are going to be some areas on the cashew that I sand through to get to the black, but that's only 2 coats if you're following me with what I mean. And if you've sanded before, you know that sanding through this amount of paint can be hideous. It can really take a lot of time. Your arm's gonna get tired, and frankly, it just stinks. And so I like this technique a lot because you can really achieve that same look. For the center of this cover, I wanted to add a little something, and so I'm gonna be using one of these stencils from this folk art stencil pack. There's 32 stencils in this pack, which is amazing. You can find this at Walmart for $9.97. This is something that I've had in my stash that I like to show you. You can use as an alternative, and because these are reusable, you're gonna get more for your money. If you don't want to buy a stencil and you have a Cricut, you're gonna get creative on your Cricut and you're gonna make your own stencil. If you don't want to make a stencil and you don't want to buy one, you're going to use one of these awesome wall decor decals that the Dollar Tree carries. If I'm being completely honest, I was kind of torn between these 2. I really like these 2. These are 2 that I have in my stash. In the end, I ended up going with this Blessed stencil. To add the black paint to the stencil, I like to use a sponge dabber instead of a brush. You're not going to get the same outcome using a brush as you would with a dabber, because you're not going to be patting it down. You're going to want to brush it on. The patting down of the paint is actually what helps so there's no bleedage under the stencil. If you happen to get some on this project, if I happen to get some on this project, I'm not really worried about it, because like I like to say, the more imperfect something is, the more perfect it is when you're making a farmhouse decor piece like this. Once you give your paint a few minutes to dry, you are good to peel your stencil off, and there we have a quick, easy little something in the middle of our cover. I am loving this, but the one thing I don't like is those spaces in the letters that you get when using a stencil, so I'm just gonna take my paintbrush and fill in those empty spaces a bit. Once all the paint is good and dry, we are now ready to start sanding, and I'm going to show you just how easy it is to sand this and really soften up those edges, really give this that distressed look, make some of these parts that I painted onto this not so abstract, and show you how this technique really is going to save you time. It's going to save your hand and your arm muscles from sanding for hours. I am gonna go over the stencil itself because I don't want it to look stark and new. I want it to look aged and old. And so I'm just gonna kind of show you this area here, how by adding the other colors of paint to the top like I did and adding some of the black, it really does make sanding this a bit easy. You just really wanna make sure that the edges of the areas where you added the paint, that there's no sharp lines, that you really just soften up those edges when sanding. I'm not gonna show you the top of this yet because I really want you to see it at the end, and if you saw the thumbnail then you know that it really looked amazing. but you just really want to sand it to distress it to your liking. So if you like a lot of distressing, you're going to keep going with it. Once I flip this over, I did want to show you that along the Jenga blocks, the framing of this, I did go ahead and add some popsicle sticks with some hot glue just to reinforce and really hold those blocks together. The knobs that I'll be using today are these knobs by Mainstays. These are a wood knob. I bought a 10-pack. I think I spent about $6.87 on the 10-pack, but that's because I have other DIYs that I'm going to be bringing to you using these. You can buy these individually for 98 cents a piece. I didn't paint these knobs before I put them on because I really wasn't sure if these were the knobs that I was going to use. I was kind of bouncing between these knobs and a set of 12 knobs that I had found at Kirkland's for $12.99. They were an antique knob. Once I put them near up to, I guess, this cover, I realized that they were just too fancy for this and that it would be best just to go with the wood knobs and just give them a nice coat of the black chalk paint. Oh my word, would you look at this before and after? This adds so much to this area in my kitchen. It really gives it that rustic farmhouse feel. I love not having to look at my range anymore. I didn't think that I was gonna love it as much as I do, but I am obsessed with this piece. This was such a budget-friendly piece. It cost me under $20 to make. The work that I put into it was well worth it. It really only took me a full day to do this. You can see that by using the distressing technique that I use, that it still looks like there are 3 layers of paint that have been aged and distressed off, and I couldn't be happier with this outcome. Alrighty, getting started with today's DIY, I will be using 5 of these Easter plaques that I had in my stash that I kind of overstocked up on at Easter time because I really like the size and the shape of them. They can really be utilized for a lot of DIYs. And so like I said, I'll be using 5 of them. This style plaque you can get just about any time at the Dollar Tree for any season, any holiday. You just gotta kind of keep your eye open for this style plaque. I'm gonna start off by removing all of the embellishments off the plaques themselves. I'm gonna take one of the 5 plaques and I've measured it to the length of 12 inches long. Using a safety razor and a ruler, I'm gonna score this plaque several times to cut through it. And you can do that easily with a razor and a ruler, using the ruler as a guide to get a nice straight line. It really doesn't take long to cut through these. They're pretty easy to do. Once you've cut through it, if you've got kind of an uneven edge, it's okay. Just go ahead and score through to clean that edge up, then take some sandpaper and just smooth out the edge a bit. So you should be left with a piece of the plaque that looks like this. With the remaining 4 plaques, I'm going to glue 2 sets of 2 together using some of Dollar Tree's jumbo popsicle sticks and Aleene's tacky glue. You really can use the glue of your choice. E6000 wood glue. I do, however, suggest if you are going to use Aleene's glue that you use the one in the gold bottle versus the one in the clear bottle, which is a gel. That clear bottle gel glue is really great for paper crafting, but I haven't seen great results in using it in a project like this. So by placing some of the glue on the popsicle stick, you can place it on the seam where both the plaques meet together to adhere them together. I'm gonna do that with 2 plaques side by side, then I'm gonna take the remaining 2 plaques and kind of set it right at the bottom. You can see how I'm doing it here, and I'm gonna attach these 2 plaques as well the same way. You may have to cut some of your popsicle sticks to make them work and make them fit, but these popsicle sticks are pretty easy to cut through using some old scissors or even some wire cutters. With this plaque here that we cut, this is gonna go right along the bottom of the 4 plaques that we just glued together. You can see here how I did that. Sorry I didn't get it on film, but you can see how I did it here. I also did take and place some painter's tape along the back side where the seams were, just to kind of help hold it together and keep those seams nice and tight. Now taking some of this lightweight spackling, this is one of my favorite tools to use from the Dollar Tree. It's really great when working with these plaques because you can fill in the holes that the plaques come with, that the twine hangers were once going through. And so I figured that I would do that in the holes, and I would run some just along the seams to kind of make this a seamless piece. Now, if you're somebody who likes to work with plywood, you totally can do that. I'm just thinking outside the box, showing people how they can use these plaques from the Dollar Tree to make a sign like I'm making today. And you can very easily do that for a very budget-friendly price using these plaques from the Dollar Tree and just kind of gluing them together side by side. But like I said, if you want to go to your local hardware store and you want to use a piece of plywood because you like woodworking, you could totally do that too. Once I've filled in all the holes and all the seams with the spackling, before it dries, if you take a nice wet sponge, nothing that's dripping, and just kind of wipe over it, the excess spackling comes right up and it stays in the holes and in the creases that you applied it to. If you don't want to do it while it's wet, you can very easily do it once it's dry with either a wet sponge or a lightweight sandpaper. For this DIY, I will be incorporating 2 boxes of Dollar Tree's tumbling tower blocks. I love working with these blocks. They're one of my favorite Dollar Tree items to DIY with. I'm going to use these blocks to frame out these plaques that I've glued together. If you haven't caught on already, this is going to be a sign. This is a larger scale wall decor sign. This is something that I really wanted to incorporate into my kitchen, like I said, and so this was the size I needed. This is a DIY where you can really alter it to make it whatever size you want. If you want it on a smaller scale, you can totally do that, but this is the scale I wanted it to be, and so that's what I'm doing. When I did the size, I really tried to make these plaques a size where when I was framing it out with these blocks, I wouldn't need to cut the blocks, but it was almost impossible to do. In the end, I do need to cut 1 block, which I was fine with. To cut these blocks, you can very easily cut them using one of Dollar Tree's flimsy saws. Now, these saws aren't great for much, I'll be honest with you, but when cutting through these blocks, they work great. Now, to cut 1 block, it took me about 5 minutes, so I really didn't mind doing it for 1 block. If I had to cut multiple blocks, I don't know that I would use that saw. I'd probably use another method of cutting them. Once you cut through them, you're gonna wanna take some sandpaper and just kind of smooth out those edges just a bit. And like I said, it took a total of 2 boxes to frame out these plaques that I've glued together. I decided to go in with some of Waverly's chalk paint in the color of cashew. Now, these are the same colors that I used for my stove cover. And so like I said, because I was trying to go for 2 pieces that were tied in together, I'm gonna go with the same colors that I used for that. I'm gonna give these plaques and the blocks a good couple coats of this. It took, I think, 2 or 3 total coats to get the coverage that I was happy with. And if you know me, I am very impatient when it comes to my paint and my DIYs drying, and so I like to pop things in my oven, but because I couldn't do this, it's warming up outside, so I went ahead and I took this piece outside, and it took about 15 or 20 minutes for each coat to dry. Using some of Waverly's chalk paint in the color of ink, I'm going to use this to paint the blocks that I framed these plaques with. Now, when you're painting the frame, don't worry about perfection, because in the end, I will be distressing this and using some sandpaper. So if it looks like the coverage isn't perfect, that's okay. I'm not going for full perfect coverage. I'm just going in to give this some accent, to give it some dimension, and because I want the frame itself to stand out just a bit. For the wording on this DIY, I will be again using stencils, one of my favorite alternatives to the Cricut. Now, if you have a Cricut and you don't have stencils, you can very easily pull that out. You can use some vinyl to cut out your lettering, or you could even use a black cardstock. And if you use a black cardstock, you're just gonna use a spray adhesive to adhere it onto your sign, which is a great budget-friendly way of adding lettering to a sign or a DIY. Cardstock is a great alternative. The only downfall is that you're gonna need a spray adhesive, but spray adhesive isn't all that expensive. Dollar Tree carries it. Some people say it's good, some people say it's bad. You can get it at just about any craft store, and if you go to Michael's or Joann's or Hobby Lobby, you can use a 50% off coupon and you can get a nice size can of it. And so, like I said, I'm using stencils because I really like this font, and stencils are something that you can reuse over and over again. An easy way to apply paint to stencils is to use a painter's tape to keep your stencil in place and to use a sponge dabber. You don't want to use a lot of paint on your sponge dabber, because if you use a lot of paint, you're going to get the bleedage, the drip marks that come out from under your stencil. And so to prevent that, I guess that saying less is more kind of applies to using stencils. Once I've got my letters completely painted, because I can't pop this in the oven and I don't want to move it outside for it to dry, I'm going to use my heating tool to speed up, expedite the drying process of the paint for these letters. Once they're good and dry, you can go ahead and peel back your tape, remove your stencil, and in theory, you should be left with a nice, clean, crisp letter. I think that this letter came out pretty clean. There are a couple areas that need a bit of touching up, but I'm gonna touch on that later. But because we're distressing it, I'm not too worried about it. Not to be too confusing and do things out of order, let's rewind for a second. Let me give you a quick tip on how to ensure that your letters are all even and straight. If you just take a ruler and you place it on the top of your DIY like I'm doing here, and you just make sure that the bottom of each letter is at the same measurement, you can very easily have a nice straight word. I personally just kind of eyeball the space in between each letter, especially when using a stencil, because it can be hard to tape out each individual letter before you paint it, because there is the excess paper around each letter. And so once I do a letter, I'll take it off and then I'll just kind of eyeball where I want to tape the next letter, and just kind of so on and so forth for the entirety of the word. Once I've got all my letters painted, I will go back in with my paintbrush and fill in the gaps that came with the stencil, because I just want nice full whole letters. And you can see here that I am spelling out the word farmhouse, but I am excluding the letter O. And you guessed it, in place of the O, I will be using this windmill. I think that this was perfect. When I saw this at the Dollar Tree, I knew that this was something that had to be incorporated into a sign, and it had to be used as the letter O. And I wasn't sure if I was gonna do farmhouse or if I was gonna do home sweet home. Any saying really will work using two of these. If you're doing home sweet home would be adorable, but because I'm doing farmhouse for my kitchen, this is what I'm using. You can see that I disassembled it, just leaving the windmill itself. And when I painted my letters, I did place this down to make sure that I had even spacing. And I'm happy, so I'm gonna set this aside for now, and I'm gonna distress this sign. I didn't put the windmill on now because I wanna be able to distress in back of the windmill. And so I'm just gonna wait until the end to put it on. To distress this without putting layers and layers of paint onto this sign, if you just take whatever colors it is that you want to appear are coming through your base coat, and just strategically or randomly place kind of just bits of paint, splotches of paint in no particular way throughout your sign. I know it may look kind of funky right now, but I promise you that once we're done sanding it, it's gonna look amazing. It's gonna save you paint, it's gonna save you time, and yeah, it's one of my favorite ways to distress a DIY so it looks like the paint is coming through the base coat. When distressing this, I did want to kind of touch on it a little bit. I wanted to add some lines that went straight up and down to kind of give the illusion of wood panels. And so once I sand this, it's gonna look like there were panels that were glued together side by side. To sand this and distress it, I will be using kind of a rougher grade sandpaper, because there is a lot of black to sand through and the letters are solid. I don't want to be sanding for days, and so I am using a rougher grade sandpaper. And you can see that I'm just lightly gonna go over it, distress everything, kind of take some of that starkness and sharpness away. The areas that I did add the black paint, I really kind of want to sand those down to almost nothing. I want to make sure that the edges of those spots just blend in with my base coat, and you can very easily do that with sandpaper. I'm using gloves because I just did my nails and I really just did not want them to get ruined when I sanded this. So yeah, I'm not real sure how I did this, but I completely forgot to incorporate the hazelnut into distressing this piece. This was another color that I added to my stovetop cover, and so I went ahead and added some hazelnut to this as well. I am loving the way this turned out. I am done sanding and distressing it, and it looks so much like my stove cover. I'm so happy that these two pieces came together the way they did. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and add the windmill to the plaque for the letter O, and I'm gonna do that putting a fair amount of hot glue. Once I place it, I am gonna go back in and reinforce this just a bit by putting a bit of hot glue on some of the edges of the windmill just to keep it from wobbling and moving around. And oh my word, would you look at that? I love it! The letters are proportionate with the windmill, and I am just loving the way this turns out. I can't wait to hang it up. Now, to cover up this mess on the back, because this is a hot mess, I will be using some of Dollar Tree's craft paper, and I'm just gonna apply it to the back using some of Aileen's glue just by outlining the back of the plaques, putting some glue on those popsicle sticks, and just laying the craft paper down. And the great thing about this craft paper is it comes in a roll. You get a lot for $1, so you can really use it for multiple DIYs when you're doing DIYs using these plaques. And you want to use the back side of the plaques, but then you want to cover up the front side that just looks like a hot mess like it does on this one. You do that, it finishes it off, and nobody is none the wiser that you actually made this because it looks like a finished store-bought DIY. To hang this piece up, I will be using 2 of these sawtooth hangers. You can get these in a 5-pack or even a 10-pack at Walmart for just a couple of dollars. I've seen like the picture hanging kits at the Dollar Tree, and they come with a couple of these too. And I just hammered them right on into the top edge so it would go through the plaque into the wood blocks. And as usual, I'm gonna finish this piece off with my handmade with love stamp that I just love, because when I make pieces like this that I'm gonna keep, I want my kids to be able to look on the back and actually see that it was a piece I did and see when I did it. And there you have it, a larger farmhouse wall decor piece by request of so many of you subscribers. And I gotta tell you, I am so glad that so many of you asked for this and requested it, because this is a piece that I absolutely love. I love the fact that it ties into my kitchen with the stovetop cover, and I couldn't be happier with the outcome of this DIY. I feel like it's a very budget-friendly one, and to buy a piece like this in a store like Kirkland's or Hobby Lobby, you're gonna pay a lot more than what I paid to make this. And if I'm being honest, even including the stencil, I think I might have paid maybe a total of $15. But those stencils are pieces that I had in my stash that I can reuse, so I really don't add that to the cost. I would say that this cost me really under $10 to do. For this DIY, I picked up 4 of these 36-inch long dowlings, which is 3 feet long. I got these at Walmart. I paid $1.97 a piece for these. These are 3/4 inches in diameter. I also picked up 2 3-packs of these wood dowlings. These are a foot long, and they are also 3/4 inch in diameter as well. These were in the crafting section at Walmart, and I picked these up for $1 a piece. I'll also be using some twine from the Dollar Tree, and this brown and black liquid shoe polish that you can get at just about any dollar store. I'm gonna start off by taking the black and the brown liquid shoe polish. I'm using this as a wood stain because I got them for 99 cents. Like I said, you can find these at most dollar stores, Dollar Generals, 99-cent stores. I found these at my Dollar Tree. They work great as a stain. I'm gonna start off with the brown and I'm gonna completely stain my wood. You can see that this brown has a red undertone to it. Not my favorite color, but when you mix it with the black shoe polish, it makes an amazingly gorgeous walnut brown. And so I think the price is right. You can't beat it. It's a great alternative to stain. And I've had several of you ask me when I do use this method for staining wood, does it rub off? Do you need to seal it? No, you don't. Sealing is definitely an option if it's something that you prefer, but I've never had a problem with this rubbing off. It acts the same as stain, it dries the same, and it's dry to touch, so there really is no residue that comes off on your fingers when you touch it. So now that the brown is covered, we're gonna go ahead and take the black liquid shoe polish and go right over it. In the beginning, when you first apply it, it does look a bit black, but once the wood absorbs the black shoe polish, it does turn into a walnut. And from time to time, I do like to take some of the brown and go over the black just to deepen the color just a bit more. And I'm gonna stain all of the doweling that I'm using for this DIY using this method, which is the 4 36-inch pieces and the 6 1-foot pieces of doweling. Once you've stained it all, this is what you should be left with, is these 4 longer pieces and these 6 smaller pieces. This color is gorgeous and you'd never know it was done using shoe polish. Now I'm gonna glue the 36-inch pieces of doweling together using this clear Gorilla Glue. I'm using this glue because it's what I have on hand. I don't have any wood glue on hand as of right now. This is gonna work perfect. Again, Dollar Tree carries wood glue, so that is another great alternative. I'm gonna set these aside and let them dry overnight so they are good and dried and adhered together. It's been about 12 to 18 hours. My doweling is good and dried. These are glued together. They're pretty sturdy. They are not going anywhere. They are stuck together like glue. Dun-dun-dun. Shh. Anyway, if you want to go to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy one piece without having to glue them together, that is a definite alternative. I just was at Walmart. The price was right. It was a one-stop shop, so that was why I picked my doweling up at Walmart. To cover up the seams of where I glued the doweling together, I'm going to use Dollar Tree's twine, and I'm just going to hot glue it right there in the center, and I'm going to wrap it around until I've covered up the seam, and I'm just going to make it as long and as thick as I need and want it to be. It really is your preference when it comes to this part. Now taking the 1-foot dowelings, the twine here in the center, I measured 6 inches from each side and hot glued the dowelings. The hot glue is not a glue that I expect to stay. It's not permanent, but I measured down all the way down a foot in between each doweling on both sides just to keep the dowelings in place. Then taking my twine, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna reinforce the 1-foot dowelings that go across by wrapping twine around the doweling and the long post itself. And I'm gonna do this pretty tight. I'm gonna do it to the thickness that I want and then the thickness that I'm happy with. And I'm also gonna do it in kind of a cross way. And this is gonna reinforce and really keep these dowelings that go across in place. And this is what you should be left with. This here really is what's gonna keep these dowelings in place and keep them from moving and allow us to put weight on these dowelings. I did this on all 6 1-foot dowelings on both sides. I did end up adding more doweling to where I connected the 2 3-foot dowelings together because it just didn't look like there was enough. I wanted more of a thicker, heavier look, and so I did go back and add a bit more. To decorate this decorative ladder, I'll be using one of these galvanized flower tins that you can get from the Dollar Tree. I picked up 5 bunches of these lamb ears from Walmart at 97 cents a bunch. one of these black hanging mason jars that you can also get from the Dollar Tree, and this galvanized mason jar that I also picked up from the Dollar Tree. Because there's no real ledge on this ladder, because I went with using doweling, I wanted to use items that I could hang from it. And to hang all the items, I thought, what better way to hang it than to use twine? The twine is gonna just add to the rustic farmhouse feel of it. And so I did that with the mason jar. I also did that with this flowering pot. I love the way it looks, just tying twine onto each side of the pail and hanging it. I really just love this look. I think it adds so much character to this. And so I did that as well with the galvanized tea light holder. And I really wanted to incorporate the galvanized tin look and the black mason jar look all in this together, because I just felt like it kind of tied it all into that rustic farmhouse feel. And I also wanted to hang a blanket from this as well. This farmhouse decorative ladder you can make for under $20, and this is not something that you could buy for that price. So with a little DIYing, you save yourself money and you put your own personal touch on it.
For this DIY, you'll need either a hand towel or a bath towel. I'll be using this fat quarter that I picked up from Joann's, some brown ribbon, and I'll also be using this Heat Bond No-Sew hem. This comes in several different strengths. I'll be using the super strength for this DIY. I like this brand of towels by Charisma. This is sold at Costco. This is a 4-pack that comes with 2 hand towels and 2 washcloths. I typically pick up my hand towels, washcloths, and bath towels from Costco once a year right around Mother's Day when they're on sale. You can get this pack for $6.99 in May. For this tutorial, I'll be using a hand towel, and I'm going to start off by ironing my towel because I want it wrinkled free, and we really do need it as flat and straight as we can get it. You also want to make sure that your fabric, in my case, it's a fat quarter, is good and ironed as well. Once it's ironed, I'm going to flip it over to the wrong side of the fabric. And using my iron, I'm just going to eyeball about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch hem right along the long edge of my fabric. Once you've got your nice straight edge and your hem ironed over, I'm going to take my towel and I'm going to place my hem face up, which is the right side of the fabric up, onto the front of my towel. Placement of my fabric is going to be just about 1.5 inches above this decorative strip that comes on the towels. Using the Heat Bond No-Sew Super Strength Adhesive Tape, I'm going to place a strip of this in between my fabric and the towel. Then just simply take your iron on high and slowly go over your fabric. And this is going to melt that adhesive. It says not to use steam. I've never seen a problem using steam if you forget to turn the steam off on your iron. Either or, the outcome turns out the same in my book. And you can see that my fabric is glued to my towel. Then I'm going to take and flip over my towel and my fabric onto the wrong side. And I'm going to cut off my excess fabric. I'm going to leave myself about 3 inches of fabric to finish this towel off with. And I'm going to set aside this excess fabric because this is just enough fabric to do another hand towel, giving you a set of decorative hand towels. You'll want to make sure and cut off any of the tags on your towel as well. On each side of my towel, there is excess fabric. I'm just going to fold that over to the back of my towel, and using my Heat Bond tape, I'm going to measure it out, just a rough measurement of how much tape I'm going to need to adhere this fabric onto the back of this towel. Placing my Heat Bond on all 3 edges. Then I'm going to place the Heat Bond under the fabric on top of the towel, then run my iron over the top of the fabric. I'm going to do this on both sides. With the excess fabric here, I'm going to fold in my corners here, and this is going to help give me a nice cleaner edge on the other side of this towel. I'm going to iron this and place heat bond in it just to keep it so it stays down, gives us a nice finished look. I'm then going to place a strip of the heat bond right on the edge of the towel here, and a strip on the top of the fabric here. So I've got heat bond on the top and the bottom edge here. I'm going to fold my fabric over and again run my iron over the top of my fabric, adhering this fabric to the back of this towel. And to add just a bit of a decorative touch to the front of this towel, I'll be using this brown satin ribbon. I'm going to place this right across the width of my towel, and I'm going to place it about 1.5 inches down from the top of the fabric, and I'm going to cut it about 1/2 inch longer than the towel on each side. To adhere the ribbon on, I will be using heat bond again, so I'm going to measure out how long I need my heat bond to be. Then I'm going to fold my heat bond in half and fold it in half again, then cut up the center of it, giving us a thinner piece of heat bond. I'm going to place my heat bond where I want my ribbon, and by placing the heat bond first, it makes it just a bit easier. Then I'm going to place my ribbon right on top of it. Then take my iron and gently go over the top of my ribbon. When working with the iron and the ribbon, sometimes the ribbon will stick to the iron, so you want to go real gently and you want to go a bit lighter. Don't press too hard because it can melt your ribbon. Then I'm going to flip my towel over and I'm going to heat bond my ribbon edges to the back as well. Once I've got my ribbon edges nice and tidied up, I'm going to fold my towel as if I'm going to hang it. And I'm going to take my iron and go over this just to kind of help keep it in place. By folding my towel, it makes it easier to place the next piece of ribbon that I'm placing, which is just going to add to the decorative feature of the front of this towel. Because this is a no-sew towel, I want the end of this ribbon to be nice and straight. So I'm going to take a piece of my heat bond and I'm going to place it on the end of my ribbon, and I'm going to fold it over, and again I'm going to iron it. And this is going to give me a nice unfrayed edge to my ribbon. And again, I'll be placing some heat bond where I want to place this ribbon, then placing my ribbon on top and ironing it. And we can't forget to tuck in that tail of the ribbon here on the back. And I figured I'd finish the front of this towel off with one of my easy to do satin bows. If you have not seen that video on how I make my simple to do bows, I will link that video in the description box below. And because this is a decorative towel, I will be using just a bit of hot glue to hot glue this bow onto the front of this towel. These are towels that seldomly, if ever, get washed by me. If they accumulate a bit of dust, I use the brush end of my vacuum and just brush them and vacuum them off. I like to call decor pieces like these decorative towels that finishing touch, fine-tuning to a room that just kind of ties everything in the room together. And what's great about these towels is you're not paying an arm and a leg for them. You can make these for under $5.
I hope you all enjoyed this throwback Thursday of my greatest hits, and hopefully there were some DIYs that you hadn't seen because they were quite a bit older. If you're looking for more DIY inspiration on top of these greatest hits, well, guess what? You can click on the video right over here and it'll take you to some of my past favorites. Until next time, everybody, I hope you have a fantastic day. Happy crafting on a budget. Stay happy, stay safe, stay healthy, but most of all, you know what I'm gonna say. Stay positive, please, because I sure as heck am trying. Bye for now, everybody.